have you been doing youth ministry?
How do you want to count that?
In the broadest possible sense.
In the broadest possible sense?
Yes.
22 years?
So what was your first, like, youth ministry role? Like when you switch sides? From the student to the volunteer
intern.
to the leader. Okay, intern.
Yeah.
So how old were you?
19.
Yeah.
So I followed who was my youth pastor from, he had taken a ministry calling to South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And this is in the time frame that I moved out east to Chester. And he had an internship become available to work with the youth minister down there, Joey. So I took that and spent a year in South Carolina doing the younger kids. What did we call it? We called it elemental. And that was the middle school and like early elementary or late elementary program.
Okay. It's like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th,
Yeah.
something like that. Nice. So I was thinking about youth ministry as I read this today.
I heard you shout that from your office, yes.
I mean, we should read the whole thing, but very interesting about these ideas of, the idea of you keep growing. You have to work out your own salvation. And, yeah, to think about how, how do we give people tools or give people seeds, and then, but at some point they have to do it themselves, right?
Right.
I mean, this is the week of preschool graduation, which you have to explain what that means, right? I don't know how to do that yet, because there's a, stack of flashcards and letters. And Dashiell's like, oh, well, but I'm done with that school now, so I don't have to do these anymore. And I was like, no, that's not how this works.
Now you have to do more.
Now we have to build on it.
Well, I mean, that would be a good way to do it, is Legos or Connects or...
Yeah, Dashiell doesn't build, he just plays with the animals, but yeah. Try and find some analogy. But, yeah, but just the idea of like, check, done. And you're like, no, we've got to keep going and like work this out. So it's very interesting, I think, to think about. I guess we should read it first. Your voice is still recovering. So.
I'm getting there. I mix this up. I sound worse than I feel.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So today is Philippians 2, 12 to maybe 18?
Yep.
All right. So Paul writes to Philippians, his partners in ministry, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me." So, I mean, we know that Paul's writing the letter because he's not with them, right?
Right.
So here we have this absence and this push towards personal responsibility for one's own faith and for God who works in you. This like at some point you have to take the training wheels off the bike, right? At some point, mom and dad can't run behind you holding the bike because you're pedaling faster than they can run. One hopes.
True, yes.
You know, it's sort of this like, okay, at some point, you have to have some ownership of your own faith.
Well, so when I read this after you were yelling about all
I was
this.
hollering across the hallway.
That you were saying, hey, this feels like a youth ministry thing. And then I was getting the video prepped for today. And it was, I should actually read that and catch up. And it had me considering, I am who I am today because of the ministers that have been in my past who built me up to this, whose shoulders I stand on. And it had me considering that, where that's actually even now the objective, where as Paul ends it, of I'm being poured out as a sacrifice. This is parenting, but this is also what is ministry. Where as much as this is the moment I own, I'm looking ahead towards who I'm building, and that they are able to take the foundations that are set and then grow into them further.
Yeah, those generations. I mean, and we remember there's traditions where clergy are called mother or father. You know, it's that role of passing on and building up, and yet at some point, one has to be able to own their own faith, which fits, I think, very well actually in American Christianity, right? We're also very individualistic, but yet we need to connect corporately.
Which I think is actually a beautiful piece, going back to Rebecca's ordination, where everyone was asked to come and lay hands on Rebecca. And she's surrounded by people who have been alongside her in that journey, from her father.
Yes.
Who, I mean, you were elbowing people out of the way to get him.
Oh, no, I just moved them.
I was being a little hyperbolic. But you made sure he was there to lay his hand directly on her, but then others who are a huge
her sister
piece
is behind him. Yeah.
That is just this extrapolation. It's Rebecca's moment, but there's everything that has gotten her to that moment, which is a beautiful piece of one of our worship traditions as a church.
Yeah. And it is part of that, right? It's the laying on of hands and the passing things on and the surrounding. But then there's that moment to send her out, right? I'm pretty sure yesterday was her first Sunday.
It was.
I mean, she's preached there a lot, but it's hard not to think about, you know. That's
it was her
starting
first
a
Sunday as
ministry.
Pastor Rebecca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not just about ministry. Like it is about life.
Well, and I also had mentioned parenting.
Yeah.
Where it's, okay, wait a minute, this is how much of me is poured out so that my kids can try and get a better stepping block into this world or into their educations or their life.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, though. When I was at Princeton last week, it's the first time I've ever been to the Farminary, which is... Farminary. It's like farm and the seminary combined. People can do classes out there. Someone teaches a class about like order and chaos in the midst of like a farm setting. You know, they talk about sacrifice while they are having students raise the chickens, and then yes, they do eat the chickens at the end of the semester.
Sorry, you said that, and I thought you were combining farm and seminary.
I did not know. Others have done so.
But it evoked like the ancient idea of monks who just lived on the land and that.
Well, they don't live there, right? But
yeah,
yes. So yeah, it started in I think 2019. Out there, anyways. But one of the students who was a youth at Camp Hill when I was there went to seminary around the time it started, and it was so meaningful to them. So as I met the director, we have one of my family members is a good friend of his, but we'd never met before. And then I also got to say, and I was Gail's pastor, and he was like, oh, huge fan, right? Like, you know, that connection of, without knowing one another, we had passed along someone who was growing in faith in a different way.
And had influences at different points in their life.
Yes. But that's why it made me think of youth ministry, though, right? I mean, they often, not always, right? I didn't necessarily grow up in the church until I was older, but, they grow up in the church, but how do we prepare for them to live faith on their own? I mean, by that time, they've all seen that the church is imperfect. It is.
Well, and there's a very realistic conversation that has to be had of, in the 20s, there's normally a crisis of faith.
Mm-hmm.
The current language built around that is deconstruction.
Right.
Of that faith.
I guess in a way, what I'd love to hear is I was thinking about this for myself too, right? I mean, I taught middle school. I did youth ministry for a few years. But what is your hope as, you send them out? I mean, in a sense, this is Paul saying, you've got to be able to do this without me.
When I'm looking at it and I'm seeing them go into that 20s phase, coming out of college, the hope I have is that the seed that is planted has survived all of the attacks that come in that time frame where you're disconnecting from community, you're disconnecting from church, but that seed of faith is still there, and as soon as you plug back in, it's ready to grow.
So you assume that it will all get deconstructed and hope there's something left to be rebuilt.
Right. Because it's safer to assume that there's going to be a challenge of faith. And when that challenge comes, whether it's, the 20s and you just put distance because of time and life and schedule, or you face a crisis of faith that is death or suffering or tragedy, that the moment that the things start falling from what has been built, what's left is the core of your faith. And you're building back on that core. That it's not the beauty that comes out of faith. It's the beauty that is having faith that is yours. Is maybe the best way I can phrase that.
Interesting.
I can't anticipate what the crisis is.
Right.
I can only hope that I'm building up what is that strong core so that when the crisis comes.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think back to when I did have a significant focus on youth ministry. And I don't think I was anticipating a crisis so much as much as looking back, I realized that a couple things that seemed really helpful were much like this is, but it was a youth group they went to all sorts of different schools, different districts, much like our county is. And they knew that it was important that they welcome everyone and that they were welcomed even if it took longer to build friendships, with them. But, that kindness mattered and that culture of welcoming and kindness and love was different than how school was and was important. I also think I tried really hard to give them tools to pray, to build their own language and way to connect to God. That hopefully would be useful in a crisis. And also just some tools that they could approach scripture on their own.
Yeah.
This is for you, how do you open it and read, what does that look like? And not feel like it was just study or it was just they had to know it, but how does this a place for you to connect? I think those were the things I think back that I was thinking about.
So, going a step maybe backwards in this is seeing the moment that I first had crisis with church. And how a lot of what was the extra of church fell off. And what is this very simple belief of, okay,
The core remained.
right,
Yeah.
that Jesus is who he says he is, or this is nothing but a bunch of moral teachings that maybe have some value, but if he's making this claim, even those moral teachings are dubious if he's not who he says he is.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm walking into it with, what is my perspective and lens when I'm trying to enable those kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense where an experience shapes that. Well, and even to speak to that, I mean, so Paul talks about that in the first couple of verses and about his absence. And also, though, about this fear, this awesomeness of God that is also at work. And I think sometimes people don't think about that for themselves, right? They maybe can see it in others, but I wonder sometimes if we doubt if that's true for us, individually. Like, we might say yes to others, but what do we say about ourselves, right? But yet it is there. We have to claim it. Okay, but then we get to 14, right? And I'm just like, oh no. Do all things without grumbling or disputing. And I was like, oh dear. To be children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation. And this is, I think, where this whole passage really starts to gain roots. Because it's not this idealized thing. It's this world around us is a mess.
And it has been for 2,000 years.
And it still is. And sometimes it's going to look darker or more twisted.
It's even more terrifying when you add the element from Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. Oh, we've been here before.
Yeah. And it feels new, but it's... Well, in some ways, though, as a historian, like, that comforts me, right? But...
I think the only element of newness we can claim or come close to is the speed at which things are communicated.
Or twisted.
Yes.
I mean, used to be much clearer in a Google search what I would trust and not. And now I'm like, where did that come from? I don't even know where that came from.
And then you get Google's AI overview.
Let's not go there. And this, I mean, for me, this holds so closely with what we talked about just on Sunday with Ascension. In the midst of this crooked and twisted generation, what are we supposed to do? To shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life. And that's it. We can't assume that the world is going to get better. But the people around us matter, and our faith matters in the midst of it.
Well, and we talked about that a little bit this morning even, where the world can overwhelm quickly.
So fast.
But the moment that we have, the gift that we have,
Yeah.
is who we're surrounded by and how we can make an impact here.
Yeah. So I feel like N.T. Wright put it beautifully. So he talks about this. He's like, in verse 15, you are, he says, to shine like lights in the world in the middle of a twisted and depraved generation. You are to be, any of you listening, to be a beacon of hope that they need, the sign of God's beauty in a world that had all but defaced it. And then he says later, is that the Philippians are to be a sign of light and beauty in a world of darkness and ugliness. They are to be a sign of God's new life in a world that only knows the way to death. So that work out your own salvation is also to hold it in the midst of this darkness and to persevere that there is a way that is not death. There is light that is not darkness. There is God in the midst of this world, no matter how crazy and depraved it seems around.
A couple months back, I don't remember where I was reading this. It was talking about what is the big picture against what is our community picture. And it was highlighting things like the reformers didn't walk into their moment of history going, I'm going to change the whole view of the globe.
Right, no.
Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the door.
Wanting to reform the Catholic Church.
Of one church.
Yeah.
And it became something more. Calvin. He
got excommunicated, so then he wasn't in the church yet.
But the conversation.
But he held his faith.
And the conversation started at his level.
Yes.
And escalated. And each of them in that way. Martin Luther King, the conversation started at his level of church. And it just got escalated. And every moment of reformation throughout history starts with
something smaller.
Here we are. How do we love our neighbors? How do we be faithful in our walk? How do we wrestle with our own faith?
Yeah.
Trusting that, you know what, the impact might only be in our neighbors. But in God's scale.
That is enough. Yeah.
And it's easy with all of the noise to lose that sight.
And this is why I love that we're doing this slow, because honestly, I've probably read this passage 100 times, but never just focused on it, especially with it being right after the Christ hymn.
Easy to just fly through.
It is easy to fly through. And you're like, yeah, the world's a mess. Okay, shine a light, but there's so much in here. And it's what we deal with all the time, especially those days where it feels like it's impossible to make a difference.
But again, there's comfort, and I find that there's comfort in Paul's look back, and, I want you to grow beyond what I can. And that's the goals. We're going to,
yes,
we're looking ahead and working with youth. I get to see that a lot. That's a lot of hope that they're going to grow beyond what I can.
But we have to remember that, Paul was mostly baptizing people that were older. There were whole families that were baptized together. But while I was very much thinking about a youth group, but this is about people who are all new to faith, because this is new, and who knows what age they are as this becomes and shifts their life. And we remember, right, that, how old was Abraham when God called him out of Ur? And Moses in the desert, it seems like he was young, right? He was 40. And sent back to do all these things, and then 40 years in the desert. And age is not necessarily something God takes into consideration when someone is called. And we forget that, right? There's a progression to how we think about life.
Because we do think about those moments, like Samuel being called.
Yes, as a young child, right?
But then there's...
That one's comforting, because we're past it.
Right. But then you're like, wait,
and Mary was young,
right.
But Elizabeth was older.
Right.
So this word is for every generation, for us in every moment of life. I think especially the ones where we feel like the world is pushing us down. And Paul's not saying to fix the world. He's saying you offer the light of Christ and you point to the fact that there is life, not just the way to death.
And this is coming from someone who at this point has a global mission.
Well, but is also in prison and knows that he might not make it out of prison.
But his focus is those communities.
Yeah.
The letters that he writes. The people he has interacted with.
Encouraging people in faith.
We don't have a single letter. Yeah, we have nothing that is him addressing anyone of a high office or position. Only churches.
Romans maybe Philemon. Maybe. When he's sending Onesimus back.
But that's a very personal letter.
Yes, it is.
And that's one that is beautifully complex.
Well, and that's also the thing, right? I mean, Paul went and helped offer the good news as that light, right? But also, it's like the Spirit naturally created these communities. And do we trust that that still happens? Maybe that's what we need to pray for.
Oh.
You know, we think so individualistic. But the church started with groups of believers in places. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, like, what our assumptions are and where the Spirit might work, I mean, quite honestly, anyway.
So what does it look like to lift up the fellowship groups in prayer?
Yeah.
What does it look like to join or start a fellowship group?
Yeah.
Because these are our small community connect points in the church.
Well, and I'm so grateful they've started. I mean, that was one of the things in the midst of COVID. I was like, oh, if we had a stronger small group ministry, you know, maybe people would feel more comfortable gathering together and worshiping online together. Because the worshiping aloneness was so hard for me to imagine.
And that was a weird disconnect moment. Because we would come in on like a Wednesday or a Thursday evening and record the service. And we would have that moment of worship. And then
But it was really hard.
It was
really hard to preach in an empty room. I hate it. But that's one of those things that those smaller groups, those ways to connect, and even if it's not a fellowship group, right? I mean, the choir in itself is a small group. You know, the Bible studies in itself is a small group. Like people who walk together in faith in some way that hopefully would also encourage one another. Like we need encouragement. We need people to remind us that like just because the world is a mess doesn't mean God's not here.
Which I think brings us to the first verse that we
Yeah.
started with. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation, with fear and trembling. I mean, is that not part of what has been that journey for us as a church?
Mm-hmm.
That, hey, we worked out through a crisis, a piece that is continuing and connective and growing, the fellowship groups, and leaning into the different groups we have with.
Well, and also the challenge that, I mean, the church has faced for a long time now is that worship is a part of your life of faith. Hopefully you come in and are filled with worship, are comforted and challenged, and go back out. You know, you don't drop it when you leave the door. That is hopefully what fills you or encourages you or supports you for the rest of the time, where we are trying to work out our own faith. So I do hope that just having this one section to focus on, that it does offer that encouragement. And that goal that Paul talks about in that other letter, right? With, you know, to run the race, but to keep going in faith and realize that there's a purpose, no matter how dark and crazy the world gets, to point to Christ that leads to life instead of death. And sometimes people only know death. They can't imagine anything different. That's still true, even though the gospel's been in the world for 2,000 years. So may you work out your own salvation and own it. May we all realize that's something we have to own and to live. Offering that light and that hope, no matter how dark it gets. Remember those, I love that, like Rembrandt. That, what's it called? Chiaroscuro, the darkness and light you see in art history. And the darker the canvas is, the more the light shines. Even if it's just a little bit. Like the light shines brightest in the dark. This candle doesn't seem very bright or noticeable because all the lights are on, right?
That's even a piece of what is the artwork you have hanging in the front of the sanctuary.
Yeah, the lights in the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Whether we feel like we're ready or not, sometimes God does use us as light in this world full of darkness.
Walk as the light.
Believing that the light will be there. Be encouraged. I feel like it's really the best message for right now.
Absolutely. It's easy to lose hope. But there is light. And nothing is new. And we walk in that light and carry it with us.
So carry Philippians 2 with you. 12 to 18. Really good verses when you feel like the world is pushing you down. God be with you.
Amen.